Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of Astrid Asks. I can't believe we're in episode 8. Yes. This is another one that, before I introduce you officially, another one of the people that I had in mind of interviewing before this was even a thing. Adding Jackie and Ella to my list is Love from Wrestling Winedown. How are you today?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Good. You're definitely one of the people that I've been following you on Twitter for a little while, and I've been like getting to know you in that way. But I also wanted to get to know you in this way, so I can ask you the questions myself. and I see so many things that you post that we have so many things in common that I love, and I'm just like I want to get to know her a little bit better. And I figured this would be a great way to do it. And I've been excited to do this for a while with you, so I'm really really
Oh,
excited to have you on here with me today.
thank you for having me.
I did want to like begin doing a couple introductory questions because the first time we have you in love wrestling in any way whatsoever, and I wanted
Yeah.
the audience to get to know you before we head on to like the more things concentrated on podcasting and some other topics. But before anything, because I don't know that part of you, so when did you really start watching wrestling though?
I started watching wrestling when I was around 9 or 10. I stumbled upon it at my grandparents' house. I was just going through the TV and I saw John Cena on the Spanish channel. I don't speak Spanish, but I was just interested. I was like, "What is this?" And I watched the whole rest of the show, and then the a couple weeks after that, I just kept watching it, and then finally I realized it was on the USA Network, and I just started watching it in English, and I just really enjoyed it. Back then there weren't a lot of women on the roster that looked like me. There weren't a lot of black women that were wrestling, so that was something that kind of stood out to me. Um, as something that I didn't like when I originally started watching wrestling, but I really enjoyed, the storylines, the different characters that they had, the commentators, the interviewers, just seeing how creative they were with the storylines and, different people winning championships, losing them, and stuff like that.
Yeah, did you have anybody that was like your favorite when you started watching from the get go there? Since you mentioned Cena already.
Definitely Cena, but in terms of women, Victoria and Melina were two of my favorites. Um, they were both, these huge heels throughout their career. Melina had a stint where she was a face, but I don't think Victoria ever played a face. But um, I've had the opportunity to meet them both, and they are the sweetest people. So I'm like, how were you playing a heel on TV and you're so nice in person? And I actually had the opportunity to interview Victoria, and that's something that I'll never forget. She was so nice and just she was so kind with her time and sharing her experiences that she's had within professional wrestling, not in with WWE as well as Impact. But that was something that I'll never forget. And hopefully one day I have the opportunity to interview Melina because she definitely had an impact on me as a professional wrestling fan when I first started. I had her paparazzi theme song as my ringtone on my pink razor when I was in the third or fourth grade, and I told her that when I met her. But that's how much of an impact she had on me. Like I was a huge Melina fan, a huge Eminem fan. I also liked Deuce and Domino and Sherry. Sherry reminded me a lot of like I was a dancer when I was little, so like her costume and the way she carried herself really reminded me of like a dancer. So I really liked her as well.
Yeah, I like that you point out Victoria slash Tara for those that were watching her like on Impact. I remember like watching her on Impact more than anything, and the way she was highlighting. I met her; she's the sweetest person, and it just made me realize that the biggest heels are the sweetest people in real life. Just like if you notice, the ones with their hard hitting matches are the ones that are best friends in real life. They just go to each other a little bit harder than you think, and
Right.
you don't think about that when you're watching it. First, like if, for example, like Sasha and Bailey, they go hard at each other but they're actually best of friends in real life. So just when you think about it on screen, how it translates is really interesting to think about, and behind the scenes as well.
Right.
I did want to know, like, aside from like that, you mentioned like Tara or Victoria and Melina, did you have like a favorite storyline or a favorite match, maybe with them or somebody else?
I still really like the match between Michelle McCool and Natalia for the to figure out the first Divas Championship. I was a huge fan of the Divas Championship. I know I get slandered because it doesn't look like your typical championship belt. It was very girly. It was very, a lot of people said it was childish, but at the time, I think I was like 11 or 12, so I absolutely loved it. And now looking back and talking to other women and even men, they're like, we actually liked the belt. So seeing that match, I felt like was one of my favorites because I was a huge fan of Natalia when she came in. She came in with, she was teamed with Victoria for a lot. And I remember when Natalia was a brunette. That's how far back, I remember Natalia. And she was always just such a incredible in-ring performer. And she's always just had that, you could just tell she loves wrestling, right? And she comes from a wrestling lineage. And I loved Michelle McCool. I used to draw Michelle McCool's gear in a notebook that I had because I wanted to design gear for her. And I liked her a lot and her in ring style. Even now when she comes back for like the Royal Rumble matches and stuff like that, she is still at the top of her game. And I felt like in that match, and even the matches that Michelle McCool had with like Maurice and Melina and other people, she just really stood out to me. But that match in particular was one that I was just so excited for. I remember being so excited to figure out who was going to be the first Divas champion, and that was one match. And then I'm trying to think. There were a couple other matches that I can remember in the back of my head from like a long time ago when I first started watching. Like I loved the Lumberjill matches because I felt like, oh my God, you get to see all the women and you get to see them with their different characters and stuff. Like I think it was Ashley versus Melina at one of the WrestleManias. Even though it was a short match, I really liked that match because they had kind of been going back and forth between um, with them, as well as they were with the tag team. So they were with Eminem, or Melina was with Eminem, and then Ashley was with Brian Kendrick and Paul London as their manager. So they had that like looming storyline, but they could have gone about it so many different ways with a mixed tag or a singles match or a tag match with the men. It was just so versatile in that way. So that's a match I remember as well because I was a fan of both of those teams growing up. The other match that comes to mind is actually a men's match. Shawn Michaels versus John Cena. It was a Raw right before WrestleMania 23 where they went for like an hour. And that was incredible. Like seeing that as a fan, that was that was around the time where I first started watching wrestling. WrestleMania 23 was the first WrestleMania I ever watched. And I had never seen a match go on that long before, and they were just so into it. And they were the tag champs at this time, so it was like, why are you fighting your tag team partner? Aren't you guys supposed to be on the same page? But I love that match. I haven't watched in a while, so I might actually go back and watch it when we're done because I was so captivated. I was like, they're just gonna keep fighting. They're gonna fight forever.
Literally, yeah. Um, but one thing that I was always curious about, as I followed you on Twitter for a while, it's knowing about your podcast. When did you really start thinking, yeah, like you wanted to do what podcast?
So the idea of a podcast actually came up. So I had a co-host within my first year that we started doing the podcast. I went to school with her, and we were both journalism majors. And one night this was before Wrestling Winedown. I was on my Twitter account, and she tweeted about WWE Raw. And we had been friends before that, but wrestling never came up in any type of conversation that we had. So I asked her, I said, you like wrestling? And she's like, yeah, do you? And I was like, yeah. So, sometimes when we would be in class or we would be walking, we might bring up wrestling, but the topic of a podcast never came up. It was 2018. Yeah, it was the end of 2018. So a lot of people weren't diving into podcast yet. So I wasn't listening, but she was listening to podcast. And I remember she asked me, she was like, hey, what if we start a wrestling podcast? And I went and did my research and was looking at, the different podcasts that were out there. And there was a lot of wrestling podcasts, but they were all hosted by men. And I think from what I can remember, some of the only women that were around were those wrestling girls. And I think they were like just first getting started. And other than that, there was like no one else. And I was like, okay, I feel like this is important for us to be a female voice within this community because there's not a lot out there. So we started brainstorming. I was like, I know we can do a wrestling podcast. We can, do the reviews. We can talk about the shows, etc. But what is going to make us stand out other than being two women that like wrestling? So my friend loves beer. I don't drink beer. So I was like, I can't get into it. Like, I don't like beer. I was like, what about wine? And I still have the text where I sent her in all caps, Wrestling Winedown, because I thought of SmackDown and you just take Smack out and put wine in. And I was like, that's it. We have to roll with that. And she was into it. And then we took our marketing pictures. We started making our graphics. We figured out what music we wanted to have as our intro and outro. We got our logo made. And then we started kind of brainstorming that and getting everything together in like November, December, and then we launched the following April. It was WrestleMania weekend that we launched in April 2019.
I thought it was just because that was my other question to you. I was gonna say, how did you come up with the name? Because I figured you like wine somehow, but how did you come up with the rest of it? With the answers to the question. Yes, I feel like you were, at least to me, one of the first like wrestling podcasts that I seen with females being, I was like behind it more than anybody. And now that I think about it, with Ella as well, she had her 3-year anniversary, so just around that time too. And
Right.
I feel like even now there isn't that many ladies doing podcasts. I feel like we're coming up a little bit now, but like between last year and this year, you see a little bit more ladies rising up in wrestling media. But it's nice to see like the woman being the host and the woman behind it all, and to show like what like was going to be my next questions, like how is it like being for you, like a female in this community, because obviously I feel like sometimes we have to prove ourselves that we're watching it because we love wrestling, not because the guys are hot, even though they are hot. I mean, I'm not gonna deny that, but obviously you have to prove yourself that you're watching it more than because of that. I don't know if you felt something similar to you as well.
I actually made a TikTok on that the other day, things that I've heard as a wrestling fan, and I have heard before, like, you only watch because the guys are hot. And I don't. When I first start watching, yeah, I did see John Cena. He is an attractive man, but I stayed around because I really enjoyed the storylines. I went to school for journalism, and investigation and stuff like that really intrigues me, and seeing how things play out and storytelling. So that's what kept me interested. And it still keeps me interested today. And I've been able to find superstars and wrestlers that I really enjoy watching in the ring for their athletic ability, and that, I've been able to meet in person and they're nice, or I've had a connection with them and I'm like, okay, I really enjoy their work. Of course, I'm going to watch their matches. Um, I sometimes feel like in this community, there are a lot of men who feel like, well, you don't know anything. You're a woman. Like, name 5 matches or do this, do that. And it's like, we really don't have to do that. Like, we know our stuff and we don't need to prove it to you. I actually had a situation at the airport a couple months ago where I had on a Heart Foundation shirt, and I went to get a rental car, and this guy's like, what the hell do you know about wrestling? He's like, you look too young to know about wrestling. And he's telling me about how he used to watch and this and that. And he's asking me questions about little stats here and there. And I got it all right. And he seemed so shocked. And I'm like, I'm not going to be wearing something if I don't know my shit, right? Like, that's not me. Like, I come to the table prepared. I know what I watch. I do my research. Like, and I feel like most women do in wrestling because, we enjoy it. We want to know what's going on. We want to know just as much as the men, if not more. And I know my friends have had experiences like that too, and other women online, but I feel like actions speak louder than words. Like, we can say that we love wrestling and we watch wrestling, but when we prove ourselves by doing podcasts or YouTube shows and we show how passionate we are about this sport, that's all that speaks louder than words ever can, because we're showing that we are passionate about this. It's not just about the hot men or, whatever. It's about that we love this and we're dedicated to it.
Yeah, I feel like when you think about it, like for example, like when you were mentioned, you started watching because of Cena, and then little by little, even though you're watching at the present time, when obviously that year when you were watching, you kind of want to go back and see how he started and like what he's done before, and you kind of start doing research that way without even realizing it that you're doing
Right.
research. And then it's like you end up liking how they started, and you want to know, it's like, oh look, I have this in common with this person, because you looked it up and you started learning more about them. And I feel like little details like the commentary actually helps with things like this. Like, oh, remember in this year when this happened with this person. And that kind of helps you because it incites you to look up what happened before. It's like,
Mhm.
that's why it's great to have things like the W Network, for example, that you can go back and watch it and think it's like, oh, this is what happened before and led to this now, this year. And like the history behind it, you want to look it up and find it. Like, even like I have people, ask me about certain people. It's like, I didn't watch it back then. I know who they are, because but that wasn't like my cup of tea back then. It's just like this is the people that I like now. Like
Right.
I like people like Rollins, for example. So yeah, I started looking up who Rollins was when I started watching NXT. And I was like, oh yeah, the guy with the blonde streak. How did he come up? Where did he come from? I keep kind of like going behind him and supporting him wherever he goes and whatever he does. And that's how you kind of connect with the people when you're watching wrestling somehow.
Right. Exactly.
And now that you mentioned that part about the community, like aside from like the wrestling aspect of it, did you have anything else that has been a favorite part of being in the wrestling community?
I think being able to, form relationships with people and friendships along the way that has really meant a lot for me. Being able to attend shows with women that like wrestling has been amazing. And, I've hosted some brunches here in Las Vegas with women that like wrestling and being able to gather women who just enjoy it. And I've gotten different comments from people, whether they've been at the brunches or they wanted to come. They're like, it's so amazing that you're doing this. Like, I wish, I had this growing up, or I wish I could attend because this is something that I want. And, I've seen other people within our community gather women, and go to shows and stuff like that. And I've always been like, oh, I wish I could do that. And it's great now that I'm able to. And, I've made connections with people like, Renee Fierro of the Rest Friends podcast, her cousin Teddy Chavez, um, Casey Liendo, who's a cosplayer, Brittany Sacco, who lives here in Vegas, who's a cosplayer as well, and been able to form those connections with them and friendships to where, it isn't just about wrestling anymore. You can actually have conversations about other stuff with these people, but at the base of it, it's like, wow, professional wrestling really brought us together and formed this friendship.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that part of like going to wrestling events, do you have any particular wrestling event that has been your favorite one to attend so far from the ones you've been to?
I really enjoyed the first Double or Nothing that I went to. It was the inaugural one here in Las Vegas. It was just amazing to feel the energy in the arena. You had people from all over the world just come to one central place to watch professional wrestling. And I wish I would have participated a little bit more that weekend because I know there was like Starcast, there was Fan Fest, there was all so much going on, but I was only able to attend Double or Nothing. But I still feel like that experience was one of the best I've had. I was able to see Bret Hart in person for the first time. I was able to see Awesome Kong in person for the first time, and just all the matches on the card, had me excited, and it had the people in the arena excited because it was history being made. It was the first Double or Nothing. It was their first big event in Las Vegas, and I'm really glad that they've decided to keep the event here for the foreseeable future because it's awesome to know as someone that lives in Las Vegas that there'll at least be one professional wrestling show here, within the year.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to like talking about the podcast Wrestling Winedown. For those that don't know about it, what would you say is the concept behind your podcast?
So, Wrestling Winedown, we cover professional wrestling, obviously, but I've really been trying to focus a lot on the wine part. I know a lot of professional wrestling fans, they like alcohol or they like wine, but some are not knowledgeable in wine. And I've been able to, bring in people, whether locally or, out of Las Vegas, who are able to educate us in wine, give us wine recommendations. And I'm looking forward to having more of that on our social media as well as on our episodes because it's something that I enjoy as well. I enjoy learning about wine. I enjoy trying new wines. And I'm always telling people if you aren't a wine fan, like just like the ladies from Twinkle Toast always tell me, just try it. It's worth a try to just try something new and see if you like it. If you don't, you never have to have it again. Um, with our wrestling aspect, I've really been able to incorporate a lot of individuals within our community that have great stories, whether they are inside or outside of the ring. I've been able to have people on that are ring gear makers, photographers, fellow podcasters, YouTubers. We recently just incorporated a new series entitled The Life of a Wrestling Fan, where we speak to people who have these amazing careers who also happen to be professional wrestling fans. So our first episode that we had was with Andrea. She is an executive producer who has been with MTV, VH1. She worked at the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards this year, and then I think a couple weeks later was working the Met Gala. But she's a huge professional wrestling fan. She absolutely loves Shawn Michaels, and she always incorporates some type of wrestling memorabilia, whether it's a fanny pack, a pin, shoes, into the outfit she wears to these shows. And that really intrigued me. But her career also intrigued me because as someone that studied journalism in school, seeing someone doing such an amazing thing, I was like, wow, I really want to have her on my platform. But how do I want to talk about her career as well as her, her passion for wrestling? And that's kind of how the whole idea started. We just released the second episode a couple weeks ago with Mimi Shells, who she used to work for WWE as an executive assistant, but she also worked at Samsung, Moet Hennessy, and a couple other places. But now she's a project manager at Meta, and she also is a writer for Black Wrestling. And her story was absolutely amazing. I learned so much from her. I've had her on the show before in a panel capacity, but to have her on for a one-on-one conversation was amazing. And we have some coming up as well that I'm really excited about. Other people that, have careers that you're like, oh my gosh, these people have amazing careers. And then you turn around and they're like, oh, I like wrestling. You're like, you never know who likes wrestling, right? I feel like with football or basketball, like you kind of assume people probably like those sports because they're like the conventional sport. But when you find out someone's a pro wrestling fan, you're like, hold up, wait, you are? What? Like, so that series has really meant a lot for me because I've been able to, learn about these people and what they do on an everyday basis, but something else that they're passionate about as well in the form of professional wrestling.
Yeah, now that you mentioned like some of the people that you had on, is there anybody you haven't had on the podcast that you would like to interview, even having some capacity in the podcast?
I have a couple. So I have Renee Paquette, who I've had on my list for the longest time ever since I started the podcast. I actually met Renee a month or two before we launched the podcast in a podcasting class at UNLV. So my friend was taking a class at the time at UNLV, and she gave me her syllabus because I wanted to take the class, but it was full. She gave me the syllabus because I was interested to see who was going to come and talk to the class. And I saw Renee Young, and I was like, hold the phone. What? I was like, do you know who this is? And she wasn't a wrestling fan. She's like, no, I don't know. I was like, it's Renee Young. Like, she's with WWE. I have to be there. And she was there the day before my birthday or the day after. So my friend asked the professor. He was fine with me coming in. And she was so awesome. She was just herself. She was funny. She was insightful. She told us about her journey, from Canada to WWE. And this was when she was still with WWE. So, and this was also when Jon Moxley was not signed anywhere and people were trying to figure out if he was going to AEW or not. But after she spoke, I spoke to her and I was like, oh my God, I'm watching a podcast soon. It's called Wrestling Winedown. And I was just so excited and so frazzled because I didn't think I was going to actually be able to talk to her. So I would like to interview her just to go over her journey and to talk to her like podcaster to podcaster. And also, just tell her how much that her journey within the WWE, not only as an interviewer to the first female commentator, has meant to female podcasters like myself. So that's the first person on the list. My second one is a new one, but I feel like it won't be too surprising if anyone's been following me. I have to have Wardlow on this damn podcast for the life of me. I have been trying to push Wine and Wardlow Wednesday like no tomorrow. And I've been following along with Wardlow ever since he popped up as MJF security. I just didn't really tweet about it because I wasn't really watching AEW like that. I did go to Double or Nothing, but I wasn't like every week watching AEW. And then probably more than a couple months ago, I really just started getting in tune with AEW a little bit more. And I was like, oh my God, this guy is still with MJF. Like, when is he going to kick his ass? Finally, it happened. And his growth, just from seeing his patience, kind of just letting things play out with MJF and his emotions that whole time, to now being the TNT champion and really proving, why he is holding the title in the first place, has really been amazing to see. So I would love to have him on. And then a couple others, I would love to have Willow Nightingale on. I love her journey so far, in the indies. And I hope that she gets signed to AEW because her energy is so infectious and she is just, you could just tell she's just so positive. I love watching her in the ring. And then I want to interview Jake something. And I know the girlies need it. It's like with Wardlow, the girlies need it. And he doesn't really do podcasts. I watched one the other day where a little kid interviewed him, and it was the cutest thing ever. And I was like, you know what? I feel like Jake Something would be great to have a conversation with over a glass of wine. So we'll add Jake Something to the list.
Yeah. Do you have anybody like maybe in wrestling media that you would like to podcast? Do you like to interview kind of like that Renee or anybody from the community like itself?
Let me think. That's a hard one. I feel like I've marked a lot off that I've had on my list, but I would have to get back to you on that one. That's a hard one because I look at like Denise Salcedo. I would like to have her on. I think her journey has been incredible as well. And seeing her in capacities where she's in like WWE documentaries, I'd love to ask her like what does it mean to her as both a media journalist as well as a fan to be in something like that. I would love to interview her on that. But there are a lot of like graphic designers that I've seen, gear makers that I've like been keeping my eyes on that I'm like, they would be perfect. Like I can tell they have a good story, and I see, how they tweet and the stuff they share, and it just intrigues me. Someone that I can think of off the top of my head right now is Mar Coleman, who has been making a lot of art for AEW. I would love to have a conversation with her because she makes some incredible art. And another one that I can think of right now is I'm actually having her on, but Ventika Henderson is one. She is local here in Las Vegas. I did not know she was local when I first saw her art. She had posted something that she did of China, and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then I started going through her page. She did one of Effie. She did one of Bret Hart, and I was like, holy shit, like these are great. And I don't know how I missed her bio, but I did. And then I went back one day and it said Las Vegas, and I was like, hold up, what? So I'm going to have her on the show, but that was one that I was like, okay, I absolutely need to have her on because how are you living in this city doing this amazing art? And I haven't heard of you before now.
Yeah. And now that you mentioned it, I figured I will go to the most important. I'm kidding. to the topic at hand. Because we mentioned Warlow. I've seen your post about Warlow, the shirt and everything that we have going on, which I'll probably ask Zach to link it in the description of the video for those that haven't seen it, because Lo has amazing shirts that say Warlow on it. He's been so happy about seeing them online, which is, I love his reaction to seeing them when he sees them online too, like the tweets. But like that you mentioned, like, how was that? How did your love grow for him? I guess watching it every single week and like wanting him to kick MJF's ass, because I started watching. I didn't pay attention to him at first. I wish I had done it, but I feel like little by little, having him behind MJF, you kind of like your eyes are drawn to him as well. And then now that everything that has gone up, and it's like, how do you go from being like the bodyguard to being champion now? It's incredible to think about.
I feel like he's just been waiting for that perfect time, right? And like I said, you could kind of tell from his mannerisms and some of those moments that he had with MJF, like his patience was running low. And, the match at Double or Nothing, it was a good match, but there was so much rumors surrounding MJF going into it that I think for me as a fan, I was like, is this match really going to happen? Because if MJF flew home, and what is Wardlow going to do? That was my concern. But I'm glad that everything worked out and that, MJF showed up to work, as the people said, and Wardlow picked up the win. And, a couple months later, now he's holding a championship. And I feel like, this is just the beginning for him. He's done a great job so far, with this character that he has. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what's next for him. I feel like he is championship material. He's been able to win over this female demo that the people talk about online. And he's a great not superstar. He's a great wrestler. And, I know there's been a lot of comparison with like Batista and him. And I know he looks up to Batista. And I very much do see like a Batista type style with him. So, and we know the career that Batista had. Batista had an incredible career. He's going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, hopefully this year. So, I think Wardlow's just beginning. He had his indie run and stuff like that, but with AEW, I feel like this is only the beginning for him.
Yeah. How did you react when he won, though?
Oh, I was so excited. So, I'm here in Las Vegas, so I don't watch AEW until like hours after the people on the East Coast. So people were sending me the little post that he won, and I was like, oh, yes. And the confetti, it was great. Like, I'm glad that they went above and beyond to make that special moment for him even more special. Um, I'm very excited for him. And I think, I hope that his fan base grows even more now that he has a championship and he'll be able to really get in these storylines with these other wrestlers that will not only, strengthen his in-ring skills, but also strengthen his um how the fans feel about him as well.
Yeah. Do you have anybody like in mind that you would like for him to face now that he's champion?
You know, I want to see him face Ethan Page because Ethan Page was very much crushed that Scorpio lost the championship, but um I think Ethan Page versus Wardlow would be an interesting match because we know that, Scorpio and Sky or Ethan are, besties or bros or whatever. And I feel like Ethan would feel like he needed to win that to prove that, you might be my friend, but you won't be me. But I don't know. I don't know if Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky are going to keep going together after a while because there's been a little bit of conflict here and there. But I do think it is time for an Ethan Page singles run. So we'll see.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had two questions or committee questions from my friend Plugger from Between Two Beers that I had to ask you. He asked me to, he told me, are you sure you're going to ask it? I said, I promise you I will. Like, I had them written down. He told me while we were watching AEW Live here on Sidecast, and I said, tell me that question. I'll top it up right now because I promise you it will not go unanswered. So he has two. So I'm going to go with the first one. He says, what's your go-to wine when you watch wrestling? Is there a different one for different shows? Like, does AW get a certain kind of wine, or does Raw get a different kind of wine depending how when you're watching it?
It really depends. I actually had someone ask me this a couple weeks ago, and I tried to explain, and I feel like I didn't explain it well. So it just kind of depends on my mood. So, like, if I am live tweeting something, I probably won't be drinking that much because I like to stay in tune and see what other people are saying and what's going on. So I try and not drink too much. Um, Sometimes on the weekly shows, like I might have like a glass of wine. I do really like right now, like a lavender lemonade mimosa. So I've kind of been going towards that when I've been watching, but I don't have a certain wine for each show. But that actually is a great idea.
Well, there you go, Plugger. You gave her an idea too. The next one I thought it was a fun one because I never done a question like this before. But I have six wrestlers, and he wanted me to have you match each wrestler to a certain wine that you like. I
Okay.
don't know if we'll have enough, but we'll see. The first one will be Roman Reigns.
To a specific brand or just a type of wine?
Either way, whichever fits you best.
Okay. I feel like Roman Reigns is a red wine. I feel like red wine to me is very like it's very specific with what you pair it with. I mean, all wines are like that, right? But when I think of red wine, I think of like very classy type of wine. Like you drink it with a nice steak. And I feel I feel like Roman Reigns is like that. He's very like high class. He's at the top of his game. And I feel like a nice red wine will be at the top of the game. So Roman Reigns would go with some red wine, I think.
Okay. The next one I got is Eddie Kingston.
Oh my gosh. I wouldn't pair Eddie Kingston with a wine. I think I would pair Eddie Kingston with like a Hennessy, to be honest. I think I would definitely pair Eddie Kingston with like a brown liquor. I don't think I would pair him with a wine. Eddie Kingston to me is like I actually met Eddie Kingston. I met him at the karaoke thing that AEW had. This man was so nice. And but I feel like his energy gives off like Henny energy. So I'm gonna pair him with Hennessy. I'm not gonna pair him with a wine.
Oh, interesting choice. Next one will be Cody Rhodes.
Hmm. uh, um. Hmm. I think Cody Rhodes would be a champagne. Very
Ooh.
sparkling, dashing, if you will. I feel like, you know, Cody Rhodes has been in a lot of companies. He's mixed well with a lot, and you can mix a lot with champagne. You can mix orange juice, pineapple juice, all types of juices. It works well with people. Cody Rhodes works well with a lot of people. He's worked well in a lot of companies. I'm gonna go with champagne.
The next one will be Jade Cargill, our TBS champion.
Hmm. I am actually going to go with Mary J. Blige's wine that she has. It's in like a golden bottle. I think it's a white wine if I remember correctly, but it's very good. The bottle reminds me of like what I think of Jade Cargill. Like it's very golden, like it's classy, but it's like it's sophisticated, and I feel like that's what Jade Cargill is. And Mary J. Blige is obviously a black woman, and I feel like something black owned would go well with Jade Cargill. But I feel like I wish I, you know what? I'm gonna show you the picture of the bottle of the wine because it reminds me of her. Um, let's
That's
see.
interesting. I work for what family owned company of like a liquor store, but I've never seen her wine. I don't maybe we don't have it, but I haven't seen that one particularly.
It's
Oh,
called
that is
Sun Goddess. So they have two kinds. They have a Sauvignon Blanc and then they have a Pinot Grigio. I've tried the Blanc, and I don't know, the bottle and the marketing of it just screams very classy to me, just like sophisticated. And I feel like that's what Jade is.
Mhm. The next one that will be interesting will be Orange Cassidy.
I have to go with a mimosa. I have to go with a mimosa. So, but you know what? I don't think Orange Cassidy is like expensive champagne like what we had for Cody Rhodes. I think I'm not trying to be mean. Orange Cassidy. I did see Orange Cassidy also at the karaoke, and I didn't take a picture with him, and he kind of looked at me sideways. So I was like, okay. Orange Cassidy, I think, is like a brute. That's a type of champagne. But I think Orange Cassidy is the type that you get at Sam's Club that's like huge. Because Orange Cassidy brings a lot to the table, even though he might not look like he does, right? He comes to the ring, he's very casual, and then he gets in there and he, kicks ass. That's what I feel like a brute does. You have a bottle, it might not look the best. It might look plain almost like a plain Jane, but then you open it and it's time to party. Blend it with some orange juice, you have a mimosa.
Well, there you go. And for the main event will be Warlow.
I think I said this before. I feel like Wardlow is a man that likes a nice red wine. I was listening to one interview that he did with Bleacher Report, and he mentioned that he likes tequila, which I could definitely see that, but I feel like he might like red wine. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he likes tequila, he might like something fruity. So he might be into like maybe like a Moscato, because Moscato tends to be a little bit fruitier and sweeter. But I don't know what he likes to blend with his tequila, so I can't 100% say. I'm going to say red wine or Moscato.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a bonus one because you mentioned him and I didn't include him, but I would like a Jake something. You gotta mix him up with something somewhere.
Oh, geez. Oh, Jake. I'm trying to think. When I see Jake something, I think of beer for some reason. Like I think of a nice like cider beer. I don't see wine for him, but I don't know. That's a hard one. I want to know if he's actually a wine fan to begin with. That's a question to ask him. Are you even a wine fan? I might have to tweet him after this and be like, "What's your favorite kind of wine?" Because I can't pinpoint him right now for one. I can pinpoint him for maybe like a beer, but not a wine.
That's an interesting one. But no, we gotta tweet at him. We gotta know the answer to this question. It's an important one that we got going on. But no, more than anything, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to do this with me, and just letting people know where they can find you. What else do you have going on with your podcast coming up soon?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. You can find Wrestling Winedown on both Twitter and Instagram at WWDCAST. We are on all of your favorite streaming platforms. We do have a merch site, shop.wrestlingwinedownlv.com. That's where you can find our Black Wrestling Queen shirt, as well as our 1-800 War Daddy, which is our Wardlow shirt. And we will be launching another Wardlow shirt soon to replace that one. So get that one while you can. And then we have a couple other things coming down the pipeline in terms of merch. We have new episodes coming out, every couple weeks. We have one coming out this week with Iridian Fierro. It's our Chardonnay and Cheesemay, a series of episodes that we have, which is like wrestling girl talk. It's kind of like me and you right now, just kind of talking about stuff, just the girls, and kind of giving our input on the latest in professional wrestling news and stuff like that. Other than that, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for coming in, and thank you everybody for watching. And this is episode 8. Episode 9 will be coming up soon. Hopefully, by the time you're watching this, episode 9 has aired. It will be part of the 24-hour stream that we have going on Love Wrestling. So I'm really excited for that because the first ever live episode. I haven't done a live one, so I'm excited and I'm nervous. But I'm looking forward to it because it's one experience I haven't had that I wanted to have. So here you go. It's off of my list now for sure. But yeah, I appreciate everybody watching, and check out her podcast and check out everything she's doing, and follow her on Twitter because she has a great Twitter account. I've been following her for a while now. I don't remember exactly when I started following you, but I've been watching you for a little while now. And it's just interesting whenever Warlow comes on screen, seeing your tweets. I just love looking up and reading them. Always a good time. But thank you for watching, and have a nice day.